Okay, guys, let's talk the nightly check-in. Super important format because this is the foundation of skills that we're going to use to help you recover. Recovery is a skill set, and it is something that we acquire over time. And as long as we're accountable to it, I want to be really clear. Then we can help grow the efficiency of each skill. We can help grow our mindfulness of each skill. And accountability is never going to be about, I want to be really clear, it's never going to be about identifying what you didn't do and why, but it's really about revealing the thought process that keeps you from executing it daily, or the thought process that leads you to breaking a boundary or to act out. And that's really what accountability is about. And this skill set is going to help keep you living habitually, but it's also going to keep you supremely boundaried. And if you think about this, the people in life that you love and respect the most are the people who, no matter if it's in business, if it's in academia, if it's in sports, if it's in any walk of life, they're people who are habitual, but they're also very, very boundaried. And that's what this is going to help you do. So to that end, I'm going to go through the format. This is what you're going to use each night when you check in, but it's also going to be for the weekly call as well. So here's what it looks like. So you've got the check-in format. I want you to follow along, and that way you'll be able to make sense of what this is about. And you're welcome to obviously reference this video as often as you need. The first thing is going to be emotions. Emotions to me were the biggest catalyst to acting out because I was feeling so much emotion day to day, but I had no idea what I was feeling. And I would be so wore out emotionally and so spent by the end of the day that I simply wanted to numb what I was feeling. And I didn't realize that I was feeling an enormous amount of emotions. So what we want to be able to do is help you, number one, recognize, and number two, articulate the emotions that you feel day to day. And to that end, we're going to have you go to feelingswheel.com or just Google Feeling Wheel. And from that, you're going to find a feeling wheel that works best for you. And you're going to save that in your favorites on your phone because it's something that you're going to reference when you check in each night. The idea with this, a long-term idea with this feeling wheel and with identifying your emotions is to become real-time aware of your emotions. Real-time aware. But that's not going to happen at first. Meaning like real-time is when you're going to, in the moment, realize, okay, right now I'm in this work meeting and I'm feeling threatened and disrespected and angry and mad and resentful and frustrated and defensive. That's what you want to be able to get to in the moment. But what's going to happen is you're going to start first with being retrospectively mindful, and you're going to work your way towards being real-time mindful. And the way that we become retrospectively mindful is every day in your check-in, you're going to go through you're going to go through the feeling wheel, and you're going to identify the emotions that you felt from the day, or probably more likely going to be from one particular circumstance or situation that stood out for you that day. Here's the thing. Sometimes it's hard for us when we can't really articulate what emotions we're feeling. It's hard for us to just say, this is what I felt during the duration of the day. But if you can identify any experience whatsoever that stands out from the day, that's going to help you say, okay, I can address the emotional effect that this particular situation had. And what's really important is you remember, it's just whatever situation's in front of mind. Situations aren't good, they're not bad, they're not right, they're not wrong. And likewise, as an extension, the emotions, they're not good or bad, they're not right or wrong. And so we want to give you, I want you to give yourself permission to say, I'm not going to judge my emotions, nor am I going to judge the situation. The feelings just are, they're benign. So there's no reason to say that you're a good person or a bad person because of what you felt. It's just a human experience. So again, the first step with your check-in in your emotions is identifying a situation from the day that stands out no matter what it is. And the second is to list a minimum of 12 emotions that you felt. And it doesn't matter if you felt them to any small degree or any dominant degree. I want you to identify those and just list those. Now here's what's important. In this process, what's really easy to do is to get caught up in the narrative of that particular situation and explain context and background and why this took place and this happened here. But that's not the important thing. That's not the skill. What is the kind of the tricky skill behind this is identifying just the long list of emotions that you felt, because that's really the emotional price that we paid for that day. So imagine that we have an emotional capacity. Imagine this is the tank, and you start here at the beginning of the day, and during the course of the day, you're going to feel all kinds of emotions throughout the day, right? all kinds of situations. You're going to feel emotions, but if you get to your emotional capacity, the best thing to be able to do is just to unload those emotions. Because if you carry your these emotions from today into tomorrow and into the next day, it's only going to be a matter of time until something's going to give, because you're just amped out, and holding onto those emotions is not the healthy thing that we want to be able to help you do. We want you to be able to let those go. This is how we do that. So those are emotions. Again, identify situation and list at least 12 emotions that you felt because of that situation, and list them rather than focus on the list of emotions rather than the narrative. The second list of on the nightly check-in list is dailies. Okay, dailies, these are daily activities for healthy living, and these are things that are going to put you physically and emotionally into a really great state of mind to best deal with life when it comes. We all know that life's going to happen. Like, there's just no question. That's just how it's going to be. But what we want to be able to do is help you get to the place where when you're tired, you're going to have more mindfulness. When you're stressed, you're going to have more mindfulness, and you're not going to want to retreat and numb with the situations that you're dealing with. So the first thing we're going to be able to do, well, let me just back up on this. These daily activities are going to help you physically and emotionally and mentally, but they're meant to be small in time, short in time. So for instance, one of them is going to be a daily workout. And I'm going to say that the daily workout needs to be just 30 minutes and that's it. And especially if you don't have a previous norm of working out, I don't want you starting from doing nothing to running like 10 miles, because when you wake up tomorrow and after having run 10 miles today, you're going to be so sore and you're going to hate everything moving and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to want to work out at all. But the idea with this is it's not a matter of how much you can do today. It's a matter of what can you do today that you can sustain over a long period of time, like indefinitely. Because the real beauty behind working out is it's going to be an outlet for you. It's going to provide you mental clarity, stress relief, and emotional release. And those are all super key benefits to working out. And chemically, it's going to help your body to be in a really great place. It's not going to be the key in removing any struggles or trials or any temptations for that matter, but it's going to put you in a place where you can more healthily, maybe in a more skilled way, identify the situations, move through them in a more effective way. And that's just going to be a really key function. So again, we don't want anything long. I don't want you doing anything that you hate doing. So for instance, if you hate running, I don't ever want you to think about running. But if you love to play pickleball or you love to swim, then I want you to do those things. I don't care what it is, but I want you to engage in those. And if you've already got a daily habit of working out in place and it's something that you have sustained over months and months, then I want you to continue with that, okay? Super important is that it's sustainable. The second daily after a workout is going to be a spiritual devotional. And spiritual devotional is just about you connecting with your higher power, having daily communion with your higher power. And I don't care if that's sitting in nature and meditating or doing deep breathing, or if that's reading scripture, or if it's reading some kind of spiritually uplifting book from any number of people. Okay. What's important is you give yourself just 10 minutes to be able to do that. Now, I want to be really clear about this too. I used to think that I had to read my scriptures for 30 minutes every day if it was to count. The truth is that's just not how God looks at it, according to me. That's a goal according to me. I just don't think that's how God looks at it. I think what God would want is a consistent effort over a long period of time, rather than trying to do 30 minutes for 3 days and then just falling off the wagon because it's just too much and not sustainable. So I used to think that reading was the thing, but what I realized is it's easier for me to listen to it. For some people, it's easier to watch it. So whether it's read, listen, or watch, I want you to do that. And I don't care what your preference is. If it's a podcast that's spiritual in nature, if it's a book, if it's whatever. Okay, I listen to mine. So when I would try to read for 30 minutes, it lasts for like 3 days. But now what I do is I listen to one chapter of scripture and I listen to one spiritual talk every morning. But I do it while I'm multitasking and making breakfast and lunch for my girls. And I know that I'm only going to get about 40% of what's said, but I know for certain that I'm going to walk away with something, some nugget, some little takeaway that's going to help me commune with God. And that's the piece that has really helped me to demonstrate faith that I want to change. So spiritual devotional, only 10 minutes and no more. The third daily is going to be journaling your emotions. This is going to be redundant to your emotional check-in, but I want you to write this. Again, the journaling is identifying one situation from the day that stands out, and then writing a list of emotions that you experienced because of that situation, focusing on the list, letting go of the narrative. And the idea with this is even though it's redundant, by writing with a pen or pencil on paper, this is not typing on your phone, this is not typing on a computer or a tablet, this is writing it. And the function behind the writing is very, very specific, and it will aid to your ability to become more mindful of what you're experiencing. When we write, we have to slow our brains down. Well, we don't have to slow our brains down, our brains just slow down. And it's easier for us to process more thoroughly and more mindfully. That's exactly what we want. And if you can approach your emotions day to day, not judge them, but focus on those and experience those, identify those, then it's going to help you be more mindful, and it's going to help you march down the road of recovery in a very effective way. So I want you to write your situation for the day and your emotions. I want to be really clear on this. Journaling, it's really easy for some people to just begin writing and write clear past 10 minutes, and all of a sudden 30 minutes into it, they're like, man, that was awesome. I feel really good, but I'm kind of tired of writing. And the next day when it's time for them to journal, what happens is they realize that they're pretty fatigued from writing because of the day previous. And last thing we want is to have you fatigued from writing. So even if you're feeling like you could write for an hour, I want you to stop at 10 minutes, because here's the thing is that if you write to fatigue, that same feeling of fatigue will carry into the next day when it's time for you to write. But if you write and you stop at 10 minutes and you're feeling really good, then that same good feeling will carry over into the next day when it's time to write, time to journal. So super important piece of this is to just make it happen. Again, write it, and write with pen or pencil on paper. And it can be on anything. A spiral bound notebook, doesn't have to be a journal, doesn't have to be anything fancy, just something that you can write on. So the last daily is going to be checking in, and that's simply just checking in, just like this, following this check-in format, and it's just sending your check-in. So those are the four dailies I want you to be able to execute. Now, here's what's cool about this: is sometimes there's so much in life that's out of our control. I remember being early in recovery, like just starting, and my wife and I did an in-home separation. She's like, honestly, Kobe, I don't know if I'm going to stay with you, because I had just confessed my second affair. And there was so much that was out of my control, and it was a very, very helpless feeling. But what I realized I was able to do with dailies is those were the things that I poured my energy into, because there was so much out of my control. But my dailies were things that I could control, and so I executed those. And I didn't overachieve. I was very, very deliberate in stopping at 10 minutes for spiritual devotional, for journaling. I was very deliberate in checking in. I was also very deliberate in just 30 minutes of working out, and that helped me to sustain those activities indefinitely. Here's what's a super important part of this whole process, and I want you to take a note on this, and that is you want to be able to create predictability. And you want to be able to create, from chaos, you want to be able to create structure that's going to help you. So much of addiction is just about, it just creates chaos. And it just creates a huge mess. And what's really nice is not only pouring our effort into things we can control, but also creating predictability in our day to know when we're going to be executing whatever activity we're going to do. So for me, I wake up with my wife at 6:15. And we're working out straight away, first thing. And then when I'm finished with that, while I'm making lunch and breakfast for my girls, I'm doing my spiritual devotional. And then I have a reminder on my phone of when to check in. I still check in. I don't know how many, 3.5 years into recovery, and I still check in every night. And so I want you to understand, and I journal, as far as journaling is concerned, I journaled the first 9 months. And got to, and I only missed four different nights, but that gave to me in a very, very, very poignant way, a very specific way of mindfulness, which I have benefited from ever since. But the point with it is make certain that you create either appointments or reminders on your phone to remind you when it's time to do this. And now I want to be really clear on this. Don't go with a time that is ideal. I want you to let go of the ideal and embrace the realistic. So for instance, if you're thinking, wow, Kobe gets up at 6:15, he works out, maybe I should do that. The truth is when we start new habits, they're so hard to keep. And I remember I did that for years, for almost like for literally for my adult life. I didn't do anything unless I was compelled. And I certainly couldn't maintain any daily habit that I wanted to maintain that I knew that would be good practice for me. I just couldn't maintain it. So the best way in adopting a new daily habit is to embrace what's realistic. So if it's not realistic for you to get up at 6:15, but it's more realistic for you to work out at 6 p.m., then do that. If it's more realistic for you to listen to your spiritual devotional on your 30-minute commute to work in the morning, even though you enjoy reading, I would recommend you doing what's realistic rather than what's ideal. Even if you do that, over time, your mind's going to become attuned to listening to the messages and picking up more. So embrace what's realistic, let go of the ideal when it comes to that. And the timing of all these things, meaning of all the dailies, and make certain that you allow your phone to work with you. We've all seen how technology can just be a tool to just wreck our lives. I've certainly seen that. But I want you to understand that there's healthy ways to be able to use technology to help you live a really healthy life in recovery. So I want you to embrace that concept. So that takes care of dailies. Moving on now, I want to talk about emotional triggers, okay? So emotional triggers, these are typically emotions that have led to relapse. And if I consider myself like a knight in armor, my emotional triggers are going to be the chinks in my armor, the weak points in my armor that I have to be really mindful of when I go into battle. So day to day, I'm going to understand and know what emotions are triggers that historically led to relapse. So let me give you a real life, for instance. These are mine actually. So the first one's going to be fatigue. Fatigue was also a huge contributor to acting out for me for addiction. And so I report so fatigue is one. So I report if I sleep well or not when I do go through my check-in. Second one is a stress of any kind. I report if I felt stress where, very, very briefly. Discord with my wife. Okay, arguments or anything like that, any kind of discord, that definitely is a trigger for me. Codependency with Ashlyn or with my girls. And that's simply just giving the power of my emotions to somebody else, in this particular case, my wife and my girls, to determine how I feel. Those are all emotional triggers that have historically led to relapse. And so the idea with this is in my check-in, this is what it looks like. Let's see, sleep. Did I sleep well last night? Yes. So I don't have to deal with fatigue. Stress of any kind? Yeah, dealt with some stress today. Codependency with Ashlyn or with the girls. Didn't feel that today. Didn't feel any codependency either. And, or discord, excuse me. So I just list the emotional triggers and just say yes or no whether I felt them. And that's all you need to be able to do with the emotional triggers, is just identify them and be super aware of those, because I promise you this, when you're at your emotional capacity and spike, and I'll talk about spike here in just a minute, when with the least amount of effort, spike can get the greatest effect with us as far as addiction is concerned with our emotional triggers. So you got to be really aware of those. So emotional triggers lead to situational triggers, and situational triggers are really, really important things to be aware of as well, just the same as the emotional triggers. They're like the chinks in our armor. So situational triggers would be, for me, situational trigger would be, I used to go to the basement and watch a movie by myself. I take my phone, I look at porn, sex with the second affair, and that was an environment, a situation that was very, very triggering, that would lead to relapse. And so I eliminated that particular situation from life, and I still to this day have not repeated that. And so you want to be able to identify situational triggers that historically have led to that, but there might be some other ones. For instance, if I don't go back to the basement and watch a movie by myself, that's one that I'm going to report on. But I'm pretty sure that's going to be one that I'm not going to repeat. But there might be some situational triggers. For example, being around family for a weekend might be a situational trigger for me that historically led to emotional triggers for me. So situational triggers can often be springboards into emotional triggers. And so those are things you've got to be really, really mindful of. For some people, it's going to be going through finals. For other people, it's going to be finishing a really big project at work. For others, it's going to be traveling with family. Sometimes they're seasonal. Sometimes they're going to be long-term seasonal. For instance, building a house, could be that. Watching your kid go through therapy could be that for some length of time. Going through therapy yourself could be a situational trigger. So as long as you identify what your situational triggers are, whether they're long-standing ones that historically have been really tough, or they're seasonal situational triggers, any of which evoke emotional triggers, then you want to be able to identify those and account for those, because you want to make certain that you can forecast and look ahead if any situational triggers are going to be coming up, so that way you can be super aware of them. And those are things that are going to take some mindfulness, but as long as you can account for those each day, you're going to be in a really, really great place to be mindful of the weak points in your armor, if you will. So after situational triggers, we're going to talk about numbing. And I want you to just identify if you were numb today or if you weren't. And if you were, how? So historically, when I would come home, I would want, like, when I come from work, we put the girls down because we're, bedtime Nazis, so our girls go down to 7 o'clock, they still do. And when I come from work, I would be here for like an hour, maybe 90 minutes. We put the girls down, and then once the girls are done, I would go to the basement, and I would take food, and I would take food like rubbish, essentially. And I would watch a movie, and I would just want to numb out and just not pay attention to anything that happened that day. I wanted to numb out, and that led to numbing out with addiction. And so sometimes, even though we're not acting out as far as porn, masturbation, inappropriate conversation with anybody else, sometimes we actually numb with other things, and that could be with work. That could be with different projects at home to avoid our emotions, to avoid situations. So I want you to identify how historically you have numbed out. But I want to be really clear. Numbing out is very different from finding renewal. So renewal might be watching a TV series 30 or 60 minutes a night with your partner. Renewal might be doing some mindfulness breathing. It might be doing some yoga. It might be going on a walk. It might be sketching. It might be coloring. It might be putting together Legos. Whatever activity is going to help give you renewal in mind and body, that's a healthy thing we want to be able to do. But you want to be able to identify where you, if you were numb today, and if so, how. And that might be simply driving home from work and just listening to music, or listening to a radio show that you just know, I don't want to face the kind of day that I had, so I'm just going to numb out. So if you can identify the ways that you've numbed out, that's going to help you in a very big way to say, okay, am I numb? Was I numb today, or was I not? And how did I deal with being numb? Did I seek renewal, or did I actually numb out with whatever activity that is? So that's a super interesting reveal, one that I want you to pay attention to. So that leads us into Spike. Okay, the Spike narrative. We have a great episode, I believe it's episode 36 on the podcast, that you can go listen to about the Spike narrative. The podcast is The Betrayed, the Addicted, and the Expert. If you go to if you go to the podcast app on the iPhone or on any Apple device, you're gonna be able, and you search The Betrayed, the Addicted, and the Expert, you find episode 36. That's about the Spike narrative. Here's an interesting backstory about Spike. Back in 2012, my two girls, who were then 4 and 2, were sexually abused by a sister of mine. And she was favorite aunt and a really close friend, and she totally betrayed us with this sexual abuse. And it was just absolutely devastating for our family. And as soon as we found out about it, we got right into specialized therapy. We found a doctor, a PhD, who dealt specifically with child sexual abuse. We went to the Children's Justice Center, went to weekly family therapy meetings, and we did everything we could. And in Lucy's experience, and she was our 4-year-old now, she's almost 10, in that experience with Lucy, in meeting with her doctor, he said, okay, Lucy, because this happened to you, your aunt introduced someone into your life, and this person tells you that you should touch someone else inappropriately. This person could tell you to hit your sister, to sass your mom and dad, to disobey your teacher, to steal something, to say bad words. And what you want to be able to do, this is what he's saying to Lucy at 4, Lucy, you want to be able to draw a picture of this person, and you want to give this person a name. So at 4 years old, she drew a picture of a demented version of Mike Wazowski from Monsters, Inc., which was really cute, totally relative to her. And but little, huge eye, green arms and legs, little skinny things, and she drew spikes on his head. She called him Spike. And he said, okay, now that you've drawn this picture, I want you to take this picture. I want you to put it on the fridge in the kitchen. And anytime you have a thought from Spike, I want you to do two things. The first one is I want you to go and tell mom and dad, this is what the Spike thought was. This is what the thought that Spike put in my head. And the second thing is I want you to write it on a Post-it note, and I want you to put the Post-it note on the picture. And the objective behind that is to teach Lucy what thoughts are hers and what thoughts are Spike's. Because there's corresponding shame that's associated with Spike thoughts. But what Spike wants you to think is that his thoughts and his truth and his narrative is yours. Therefore, he can stick you with the shame of those thoughts. So that was her objective at 4 years old, and she was very, very effective at doing that. And we still to this day talk about Spike because Spike can tell us to do all kinds of crazy things. Every person in life has their own Spike, and their own Spike has a very specific narrative. And the important thing to remember from this is that God doesn't send you wired here to say, I want to, I want to live a double life. I want to live a lie. I want to betray my partner. I want to just live in a state of a state that's just contrary to who I want to be. That's just not how God wires us when he sends us here. But because we live here on earth and because we just experience life, we end up falling into those situations and those behaviors and those thought patterns. And if you can separate yourself from what your Spike narrative is, and you can say, okay, God doesn't wire me to think thoughts about porn and to act out, that must be from Spike, then I got to be able to recognize that. So your objective is to identify how Spike spoke to you today. He typically speaks to us in four different ways. And these are things I want you to identify. Did Spike, the first thing is Spike, he will tempt us to act out. He will shame us for acting out. And shame typically is, I'm a bad person because of what I did. Shame is from Spike and says, I'm a bad person because of what I did or because of what I thought. And guilt is from God and says what I did was wrong. Very big distinctions with those two that are super, super important. So after he shames us, then he will make mountains out of molehills, take little bitty bits of truth and just blow them way out of proportion to where we get amped up. And the more that his thought process spins in our head, the faster that it gets, the bigger and the scarier that it gets, the farther from reality it becomes. And that's the super important thing is Spike is only going to feed us fiction. He won't feed us reality. And that's part of your objective in recovery, in the skill set of recovery, is learning to identify not just your emotions real time, but also identify Spike real time so you can dismiss him. The fourth way that Spike works on us is he gets us to minimize, rationalize, justify, or simply just lie in any situation. So I want you to account for how Spike spoke to you that day with each of those categories. So Spike narrative, really, really important. And if it's challenging to identify that, then we can work through that. But honestly, this is going to be one of the really key functions in your recovery skill set is identifying Spike. Wins for the day, I just want to hear what went well. It doesn't have to be recovery related. It could be anything. It could be I did great on a project. I did really well at home. I made dinner and it was great. Had a really connecting moment with my family. It could be any number of things, but I want to hear what your wins are because part of Spike's narrative is getting us to think that we're not worthy of any kind of win because of things that we've done. So you want to be able to identify what those are day to day. A slip is about curbing lust. And anytime we go to lust, we deny people of their humanity because we look at them not as a human being, but as an object to be used to gratify our sexual desires. And when that happens, that's just a really tough place to be in because we can get lost and our feet can leave the ground of reality. So here's how we're going to define a slip. A slip is defined, number one, by any look at someone that goes beyond one alligator to alligator or a second look. Now, is it possible for you to immediately look at somebody and go to lust? Absolutely it is, in which case it would also be considered a slip. But the idea with this is I want you to track how many slips you had that day. And it doesn't matter if, it really doesn't matter if it's like I lost track at 37 and I don't know how many I had, or I had 18 today. What matters is you track that, and what you track and you begin to be mindful of, you will have less of. In this particular situation, you'll have fewer slips day to day. And again, those are not things that are shared in any other place except for in your check-ins. And those are not things you want to share with your partner. You simply just want to share those here. And over time, that will improve and get better. And your ability to resist spikes, thoughts of lust will diminish. No, your ability will increase, and so the slips will decrease. That's what I'm trying to say. Last is going to be relapse, which is going to be looking at porn, masturbating, or having an inappropriate conversation with anybody else, or any combination of those in any way. And you'll just report on those. So that's the check-in format. I hope that it stirred some thoughts in you. I want you to be easy on yourself. You're not going to have a perfect check-in. I don't care about perfect check-ins. I care about your best effort, and over time you're going to see how best to do it. We're going to work with you to make sure that that's dialed in. But this is going to be a great skill set that you want to keep front of mind. Save this image of the check-in format on your favorites on your phone as well, so that way you can quickly reference it. So here, if you've got any questions, just reach out. But I'm glad you're here, and let's get rolling.